Welcome back, everyone. This is episode 2 of Working Like a Mexican. I'm your host, Rico, on the speakers, and with us again is my friend, RK. Say hello, RK.
Hey, hello, how is everybody, and how are you, Rico?
Perfect. Everything's great. So, RK, this is the American history first few episodes that we're discussing. Last we spoke, we said Christopher Columbus had arrived at the quote unquote new land and had returned to Europe and spread the news of his foundings. So we'll pick it up from there. What came next?
Oh boy, well let me set a broad stroke so that we've got an outline today, or I'll spend all day on Christopher Columbus. Um, I think that if you looked at our last one, we called it name. You know, what's your name and your personal three generations, and then also and how America got its name, both North and South America. So that kind of gives us a name and a context. And I think what we're going to hit on today with Columbus and the early exploration of both North and South America is the theme might be place. Okay. And place is important also because, for instance, if I say I'm from Africa, or I'm from Asia, or I'm from North America, or South America, or Europe, those things put a certain context around you and what probably a good deal of your life has been formed. And some of those things are what I call societal issues, you know, like what is the society's view of marriage? What is your religion likely to be, you know, based upon a place that you're from? So I think what's interesting here as we start this is uh, um, in quote, North and South America were populated. There were people there. And then as I discussed, you know, so today you and I are speaking basically European uh, languages, and we have European institutions that we've inherited. And that has an awful lot to do with the place and how those places, in essence, became more European than indigenous. And so that's what I kind of want to outline today. And it's a broad stroke, but I'll call these now. It's important to us because in your life, these are continental influences that have lasted and gone beyond. I mean, let's face it. If you speak English, England is a small little island country. You know, I mean, there's not a whole lot there. Spain is small. Now you come to North and South America, and you've got huge amounts of territory, okay, and much larger numbers of people today. I'm sure the total population of Central and South America and Mexico probably out, you know, is much greater than Spain, and yet we speak Spanish. So, and certainly the United States, which was a colony, is bigger than England, you know, and yet we, in quote, speak English. So, and it's interesting too how people identify themselves. And one of the things that I think is kind of funny when you go back to that name thing, if you're from Brazil, it's easy to say I'm a Brazilian. For instance, if you're from the United States, you don't say, well, I'm a United States, you might say you got to come up. So we've always been a contraction or an abbreviation. So the tendency is, if you're here in the United States, to say I'm an American, if you're trying to identify the place, and yet that really isn't maybe the most proper term to define you, but it fits language wise. So at any rate, where I think I want to start us with then is that the place is important. You have, once Columbus takes the genie out of the bottle, and by the way, when you ask, oh, where did he first land? He landed, actually, to be more specific, in the Bahamas. Uh, and so in the last episode, I know I kind of went with the Santo Domingo. And he did found the city of Santo Domingo, but his first landing was at San Salvador, in what he called San Salvador, in the Bahamas. So it was that area that he began to explore in his 4 voyages. Okay.
So so up until this point, RK, he hadn't hit the mainland yet.
No. And in fact, uh, he never did. Okay. Now, okay, well, part of this is, remember, trade routes and what were they trading for? And you ask, well, what did they want? Well, one of the most valuable single cargo were spices. And part of that was the interaction with the European world and the Arab slash Muslim world was we got used to their spices being of European heritage. And when Constantinople fell again to review, all of a sudden, can we find a new and more profitable route to trade to get these spices? Okay. So what they were originally seeking was to reach the east and get control of a spice trade, which was at that time the most profitable cargo. And again, think about spices. Even today, go to the supermarket and get a tiny bottle of spices, and it's not the cheapest thing in the market. You're going, well, there's a lot of things you can buy in gallons that are less expensive than the spices today. So spices were the product they were seeking. Okay, so he went down there and actually did believe he had reached the Indies. Okay, and that's why he called the natives there Indians. Okay, so he thought he had reached it, but he hadn't, and it didn't go well financially. I mean, he starts out as, "Oh, this is great. We found it. You're now admiral of the ocean sea, and we're going to get behind this." But each time he went back, it came back as, "Well, I don't have a boatload of spices for you," you know. And they're finally beginning to say, "Well, wait a minute, what is going on down there?" Okay, he actually ends up imprisoned in Spain. I mean, he fell so out of favor. But Spain is still the firstest there, you might say, the firstest with the mostest, because she follows up very quickly, relatively speaking. If you look at 1492 and then the years of his subsequent voyages, okay, and they get the idea that, there's this whole new massive amount of land out here that we bumped into, and it's a new world. The Spanish were the ones, not that others didn't try, who were seizing the moment to let's go. Okay. Now, also, they were in the best position to get word about what is there. Okay. So it began to leak back. And then I think you have 2 huge steps, which definitely echo down to today. There's no question about it. And the first one is Cortes conquering the Aztecs.
Now, who's Cortez?
Okay, Hernando Cortes is really a Spanish, in quote, nobleman. You know what I mean? But not of the highest stature, but,
Hmm.
could, he would be respected and greeted. Okay. Now, what's fantastic about Cortez, and by the way, the reason I don't want to get caught up here, any of these things, there are some books on. And when we get to early North America and some of those things, I'm going to be talking more about the individuals.
Sure.
But Cortez is a study in and of himself. But at any rate, he comes to uh, understand that there is this Indians, a group called the Aztecs,
Hmm.
and they are the
And
wealthiest.
this is
Oh,
where is this in Mexico or?
well, actually, he uses as a base and launches from Cuba.
Okay.
By this time, Cuba, in fact, has a governor, okay, appointed by the Spanish crown. And um, Cortez very adroitly, um, the governor of Cuba is a little Machiavellian. Okay, he might actually want to take credit for everything Cortez is going to achieve and do, and in fact take the money, and then, you know what I mean, moving on to the crown. And one of the great things about Cortez is he's a politician, I guess, because uh, he kind of figured that out and knew, and he figured out that I think I'm going to report all the good stuff directly to the king if I can, you know. And I think Cortez, boy, the history people will go nuts when I say this, but I think he actually might have thought that the governor of Cuba would go so far as to bump him off, you know what I mean, to make sure that he got personal credit. But nonetheless, his jumping off point is Cuba, okay? And they already have established in Spain. They've already established some plantations, you know, and they're growing some crops. But at any rate, he takes off for Mexico. Now, he has two things going for him when he goes off to Mexico. One is the Aztecs were the dominant tribe, but they weren't popular. Okay. They were absolutely ruthless, tough warriors. Okay. I mean, and you are familiar, I'm sure, with their practice of human sacrifice. Okay. Well, they weren't sacrificing Aztecs. They went out to the neighboring tribes, and every tribe, as tribute, had to send so many people that would get sacrificed that year. Times if things were going well or they weren't going well or they had to plan some big battle, the theory was with the Aztecs, the more we sacrifice, the more happy our God will be. So today we need over 1,000, you know, and those things would happen. So amidst that cruelty, the surrounding tribes did not like the Aztecs. Okay, so when Cortez lands and these surrounding tribes see an opportunity because of this guy with his weapons and everything else. And he seems to have the immediate and single purpose, because he got word that they've got gold, of conquering the Aztecs. So, number one, he's able to draw them in as allies. So when he lands with his men, and also famously, well, now we are getting into it. He was famous too, if you'll remember, for burning his ships, so that any guy who decided after a while this is going to be too tough of a deal, you know what I mean? They weren't. There wasn't, oh, we can go back to the ships and go home. Because I think he knew it would be tough slugging. He had an idea. They were going to have to go through some country and some people, and maybe not. Now, the other thing that really helped him, and I don't minimalize, and uh, he had a Indian woman who was able to translate and communicate with the various tribes.
You know
Okay.
what? That was actually a follow-up question I had for you.
Yes.
So you mentioned this woman who was a translator,
Yeah.
but do the history books talk about how Cortez, or Columbus for that matter, how they communicated with these tribes?
Well, yes. Uh, and I can actually give you an example with Pizarro too. Yeah, that translator is unbelievably important in the story. Okay, and under certain revisionist histories, um, some of the people now can, you know, um, put her more cast as a traitor. You know, helping these people to overthrow. The issue really was, if you had taken a vote, okay, all the Aztecs would have voted for the Aztec, and everybody else would have voted against them. You know, so the majority of numbers possibly was against them. Okay, it's just that all those tribes individually, no way could they stand up to this tightly knit, organized, you know what I mean, trained machine that the could put in the field when it came to war. So the Aztecs were able to control them piecemeal. And so to some degree, Cortez comes along and he's able to gather up allies and build some unity because he's out to get the Aztecs. Okay. And so, how did they communicate? Without a translator, it was very, very tough, But people have sign languages, they can present certain things. Uh, and I'll give you a specific example with Pizarro, where the Incas presented him with gifts in advance of his further movement. And the gifts were both generous, like, here's a nice gift, we want to be friends. And then there was part of it which was kind of a warning, like, maybe you ought to stop here. It's so they did find ways to communicate. And then again, in Pizarro, I'll give you an exact thing. He wasn't able to communicate per se. And so when the ultimate climax comes, where both he and Atahualpa are in this little fort, I'm getting ahead of myself. The fact that there wasn't communication led to the events which led to Pizarro being able to capture him. Okay, but in the case of Cortes, he was able to pretty well go through the country and gather support as he was going, which in terms of, okay, your foods, some of the things you'd need. I don't think you, with a larger force, you can't underestimate that value. Had he been marching all that direction with having to fight his way through every tribe, that might have been a different story. But
They have guns at this time.
yes, and that was, but
So was that almost like the deciding factor? Because I assume these natives probably did not have guns, right? They probably had, I don't know,
um, oh, they
some of
had
the older,
bows, arrows, spears,
right?
uh, primitive weapons, but nonetheless lethal. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
and
No, I get that, but I'm assuming once they see what a rifle does, maybe they get a little scared or whatnot.
it was really the cannon.
The
Okay,
can, okay.
and by the way, he knew it. Okay, um, firepower grabs your attention. Okay, I mean, even today, whether somebody knows something or doesn't know something about, in quote, a firearm, okay, and then you go, the minute you say gun, that becomes scary, and it's an explosive device. Okay, and so, on the other hand, if you've been familiar or seen them at all, there's a big difference between a small caliber 22 bullet and a shotgun going off. Okay, it's so that cannon, in essence, that would have impressed people, and I'm sure they took occasion to demonstrate it. And you are now thinking, if you're somebody willing to join him, I think that cannon had a big, an awful lot to do with it in this regard. Okay, he's only got how many guys, and you'd be counting numbers and looking at stuff. But that cannon, I think, counted for a lot. Okay, that and I think it's also um, just the sound, the explosiveness of it. Okay, the first thing that takes you back when you hear a firearm or a gun go off is usually the sound. You, you're not really aware of what it's doing, but it's making a big noise. So I think the combination that cannon certainly impressed them, and gave them the thought, okay, wait a minute, with these guys, and they've got horses and swords like we've never seen. Okay. Uh,
So to be clear, that was my next question. Actually, they brought horses with them.
yes. And Pax, he had a fairly well supported
So
expedition.
did the natives have horses? Do we know?
No, they
No.
didn't have horses
Okay,
yet.
so there are these. I'm just trying to put everything into perspective. So you have these natives, right, who have only seen people that look like them.
Right,
Now you got these guys coming off of ships on horseback
right,
with firepower, who
yep,
look different than them, who dress different than them, show
right.
up. Huh.
Well, there's even, if we're since we're dealing with Cortez, the and this is well documented too. The Aztecs had a legend about a god. Quetzalcoatl, okay, who's often depicted as feathered and he in quote was white, okay, and he had visited with them before and was going to return, okay. So when they first saw even the Spanish ship come, you got to understand they had never seen anything like that either.
That's what
So
I'm saying. Because it would seem so surreal for a tribe who hasn't seen all that yet,
right,
just to one day, like, I mean, it would blow your mind.
yeah. Now keep in mind though, as things progress, and I'll discuss this again. I'm going to contrast some of the things with Pizarro.
Sure.
As things would progress, um, I think that they began to learn as they observed. One of the things was, I really think, in the case of Montezuma, I feel inherently, or as he grew up, he was superstitious.
Who is Moctezuma?
Montezuma is the king of the Aztecs.
Got it. Okay.
He's so he um, uh, he was superstitious. So the guy calling the shots is superstitious and to some degree, I want to say timid about how he handles Cortes. You know, he was not one of these guys who immediately said, "Wait a minute, who are how many of them are there? Get the army, we go now." You
How many are there? Do we know?
The actual number of Aztecs we couldn't speculate on. I mean, you can speculate on, and they have pretty good reason to believe there were this many. Okay, but I think that you could easily say he was able to thousands of men in the field at a time. Okay, and
Okay.
even tens of thousands of fighting men. Okay,
Okay. So a large group.
yes, yeah, and when we get down, I'm half in Pizarro story anyway. Atahualpa, the Inca emperor, he had actually taken the throne after a massive 3-day battle with his brother, and he could put 50,000 warriors in the field.
Okay.
You
So
know,
these are huge groups of people.
so these are larger groups of people, which is where I'm going to contrast something between Cortes. Cortes was able to gather strength and add to his numbers. Okay, so that when his confrontations come with the Aztecs,
Hmm.
it's not it's a little more it's closer to getting even when you factor everything in than it is to, you know what I mean, being totally in favor numbers wise of the Aztecs. But
Now,
even then,
Cortez are
pardon,
Cortez. I'm sorry to cut you off.
yeah.
How many guys did he show up with? And to be clear, was it only men, or were there any women's on these
Oh
expeditions?
no, there were always some auxiliaries in the in the camp, so to speak.
Hmm.
Uh, his effective number of fighting men might have been in the 500 range. And, you know, his whole party was probably easily another 100 or two, you know, I believe. Uh, People can dispute that, and that's fine. It's still a limited number of people against what isn't established on their home turf. You know what I mean? That's in the thousands. So I don't want to take anything away from it, but a part of his plan was to gather these tribes with him. Okay, and I believe he had some advance intelligence that the Aztecs weren't all that popular, that they had all the gold. Okay, so I think there's things that he was aware of that he leveraged to his advantage. And even then, well, let me get on with it. As we'll just skip to this part here with him. His party advances, it gains strength in numbers, and he finally has his confrontation with Montezuma. Okay, and I think it's more intimidation than conquest initially, and he captures Montezuma. Well, now without a major bloodbath, okay, he's got their king, and the Aztecs will do anything, and Montezuma is still issuing orders. Okay, So the first thing he does is he says, "Hey, fill up this room with gold, this with silver," and you know what I mean. And he realizes, hey, they really do. And he's looking at this massive amount of gold, right? So what happens is,
Is and sorry to cut you off again.
mm,
Is gold valuable to the Aztecs the same way it is to the European guys? Like, do they both value it as I guess this was like the original currency, right? Is
yeah.
gold?
Well, the saying is, gold is God's money. Okay, and it just seems the first coins go back to a guy named Croesus, who lived in Anatolia, what is now modern day Turkey. Okay, and this is BC, and he minted coins and had a lot of gold, and you get the expression down to today, always as rich as Croesus. Okay, so and when they talk about even biblically Solomon and the wealth, that was then the Israel uh, country. And they always mention gold, and same with all the pharaohs. And look at King Tut's tomb, you know, the golden mask. So I guess, I mean, there are a lot of things I'd rather have than gold. I can't eat it, can't have, you know, but I mean, it's somehow valued, and it's been around for a long time. And here's a lesson I think for all of us to understand, even today. You look at gold, and in math, you know the transitive power, right? The transitive. If A equals B equals C, then A equals C. Okay. So no matter whether you're measuring it in dollars or gallons or whatever you're buying or whatever, they've always seemed to attach an amount to gold. Okay. Now, there you look at our country. I mean, I remember gold in like 2004 being roughly, I don't know, 350 an ounce, you know, and now we're 1800 to 2000 an ounce. That's kind of the melt value, you know. So, and in the meantime, my dollars are, you know, less and less every time I go. Okay. So but it always does translate into something. So for instance, maybe in another 10 years, gold will be worth $8,000 an ounce. You know, you'll still have dollars equaling something. Gold has been a way that people stored wealth. Okay, you could always grab it in your little treasure box and hide it. You could always run away with it, and wherever you got, it would translate into something if you really had to use it. You know, I think so. I think that's what happens. Whereas um, printed money, you know, it's only worth what it can buy you. So gold translates into every other currency or trade. So, yes, back then, now they probably didn't put the same value on it as the Europeans did. You know, in other words, their needs were met by the corn crops and you know they were civilization is about 3 square meals a day. You, you know, but so that's where you get the gold intervening. So, but Cortes was after the gold. He was after the wealth, and he knew they had it. So,
So they bring it all out.
yeah, they put it in here. Now he knows he's got to get this stuff back to Spain somehow to do what he really wants to do, which is really the motivation of most of the Spanish. Their idea was to go to the New World, make your fortune, and go back and live in Spain. You know, the idea was to be back to the court and be a Spanish gentleman
Okay.
and not have to work. Okay,
So
which
it's
again,
essentially it's go to the new land,
yeah,
grab silver, gold, whatever else is of value,
right.
take
Mhm.
it back home, and then stay home, or is
Yeah,
that what?
live the life of a gentleman who's filthy, stinking rich and doesn't have to work. You know that I think would have been their goal for many of them. And if they were part of the party, it was to assimilate that. Okay, and you see that in fact in the development of Latin America, you know, Mexico and Central and South America. Um, there was, especially initially, there was a real class distinction between you were a Spaniard born in Spain. Okay. The next important thing was you were a Spanish descent, but born in America, but of Spanish descent. And then the third category was okay, we've mixed with the Indian tribes. Okay. And then the fourth category might have been you're an Indian. Okay. So they became very stratified. Okay. And it was based a little bit more on lineage and determining your class, and so again, it was a little bit of a challenge to the Spaniards because when we mentioned before that they had expelled the Jews in Spain, that was a loss to them because the Jewish population largely took the positions of commerce, merchantmen, and everything. Okay. So they were also expelling their kind of merchant class. So they weren't, how do I want to say it, great at business, because again, it just wasn't on the radar the same way. So at any rate, Cortes gets there. However, the conquest of the Aztecs is really a 2-year deal, and the Aztecs, they, Montezuma eventually, yeah, I'll become Catholic, same as that, you know what I mean? I'll do this, and he does whatever they want him to do in essence, and then they reach a stage where they're done with him. Now the Aztecs do rebel. Okay. And here's a story that's not often told. And they say, okay, we've had it with you and we've figured out there aren't enough of you that if we all rise up, you can do anything about it. So reality is the capital city is an island, as you know, and they have these thoroughfares. Okay. The Spanish realize we're in trouble here. This is like a jail to us too. So they pack up all the gold and all the silver and everything and say, we're getting out of Dodge. Okay. And the Aztecs are attacking. Now you get into the numbers game. Okay. And it's not going well for the Spanish. This becomes literally a fighting for your life, desperation retreat. Okay. And the irony of everything is all of that gold that they brought in and everything else, they're going across these causeways, and in the fighting, they gotta basically the gold gets lost overboard, into the lake, and they're lucky to get out with their lives. Okay, the ones that do, a lot got killed. However, they know the gold is there, and they then do come back in greater numbers, greater arms. You know what I mean? And now they put an end to the Aztecs as a military power, and they begin the process of okay, now we lost all that stash of gold. Where are they getting it from? Oh, you've got mines where you're mining this. Okay, so they basically take over the mines, and the Indians now have to provide, and we've got records of this. We need 5,000 or we need 7,000 to work the mines this year. However they're doing it. So there's written records pertaining to that. So basically now the Spanish are pulling the gold and silver out through mining and continuing to get it and loading it up and sending it back to Spain. Okay. Now, that makes Spain almost immediately the richest and the most powerful, power in the world for that time. And I think you could say that with some assurance because keep in mind, they've been fighting wars. They have got a mentality. They don't shy away from war. They've been doing it for 700 years. They have a bravado about them and confidence. And the 1500s are really Spain's century. All the other countries that want to get into the game are smaller and don't have the money or the power. Okay. So Spain uh, in the 1500s is able to explore and take most of the land in North and South America okay, and in quote, claim it, all right, and have expeditions that have explored it before a lot of these other countries even get out of the starting blocks, so to speak.
So at this point, are they just traveling back and forth, or are they now living there as well?
Oh no, many of them began to set up shop.
Okay.
Okay. You find this everywhere.
And do
When
we know where exactly?
Well, Mexico City
Okay.
becomes the center, which was the Aztec capital.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
and so to this day, when you go to Mexico City, that's the place.
Hmm.
You know that, and I think today Mexico is, you know, one of the largest cities in the world. Mexico City.
Yeah, I think it is like the largest, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's the number one. So it becomes the epicenter. Okay. Now, keep in mind, because of shipping in those days and the trade ships and you had other places become very important to them along north and south. And then you also have the conquest by Pizarro of the Inca Empire. And we really need to look at that one because that, if you get a chance, that's one that's fun to read the story on because it's almost unbelievable in my mind. Okay. Pizarro, if you don't mind, I'll shift, but basically 1519 to 1521 is the conquest of the Aztecs. Okay. Now, not too long after that, they get pretty good information and say, oh, there's this empire in the south, the Inca Empire in southern America, South America. And, they've got a lot of gold, and there's something down there, and we're going to go conquer that. So in 15, and I just want to double check my date. Yeah, 1532, Pizarro undertakes that mission.
And
Okay.
where's Pizarro from?
Pizarro is Spanish also.
Also,
Okay.
okay.
So none of these guys are what you want to call second generation yet. You know,
And so far, it's really been Spain in all this action, right? Like no one's really jumped in from anywhere else.
well, we'll get to that quickly, but the answer is everybody kind of began to jump in, okay, because a lot of the thinking, and you've heard this before too, okay, gee, there aren't spices here. What are we going to do?
Hmm.
Okay. And the Spanish hadn't struck gold yet. So there were a lot of early explorers who were, interestingly enough, saying, okay, there's got to be a way through this land where we can sail west and get to the Indies. They still wanted to get there. So it's come down historically as the search for the Northwest Passage, okay, that they were seeking a way around this or through it to get to the spices in the east. So, no, there was early exploration, Cabot, Hudson, after Hudson Bay, okay? And then you're going to, but most of them do not get going and rolling until the 1600s, and I'll present that too in a little bit. But the Spanish are there, the firstest with the mostest, and they benefit. And also, we will find out Europe's got another big problem at home between the countries that is somewhat preoccupying them. And I'll get to that. But the Spanish, keep in mind, we're all Catholic. We can beat anybody. They had no problem going. We're going all in. And but after the gold coming from, and it continued to come because they were mining it. It isn't like we go and we rob you once. There's nothing there. See ya. Oh no, this is a continuous supply. Okay. And so, and which also means he can contribute more to the Pope and become the Pope's best friend, get supported by the Catholic Church throughout all of Europe. So there's an awful lot about the power that the gold brought Spain, but it's their century anyway, in my mind, for a lot of reasons. Now, Pizarro takes off now in the 1530s. Now, they know they're going against, in quote, an empire. I mean, this place is legit. They have a road that connects them with messengers from top to bottom. Okay. Um, and if anybody's seen the pictures, the pictures of Machu Picchu that they built at high altitude, and this archaeologists are saying, how did they do this? We have fights over it. But so effectively, they were something else. Uh, and so now Pizarro goes down. Okay. Now he comes into the land, but this is the thing that just blows me away. Cortes comes with a few hundred cannon and Indian allies. Okay. Pizarro comes with really what amounts to his total party was 180 something. Okay. But his actual number of soldiers, I'm going to I wanted to double check this because I wrote it down. Um, his actual number of soldiers was 168 Spanish soldiers. Now, don't get me wrong; those were tough guys, but I don't. You're going to conquer an empire, and the new emperor had just fought a civil war with his brother, and he could probably command and put 50,000 warriors in the field. Okay, and in
Now,
fact,
do these guys, the Spaniards,
uh-huh.
these guys, the fighting guys, are they aware that they're essentially going to risk their life, or
Well,
is that not disclosed to them?
I used to joke. I believe that every single one of those guys bought in and said, "Oh, we can take these guys, no problem." And you wonder where they get that kind of confidence. Okay, that's just it's wild to me. But what I will say is, um, they had the horse. Incas didn't have the horse. The horse, the people seeing a man on a horse and stories about, okay, is this a new creature or, no, they figure out very quickly that these are men riding an animal they haven't seen. But nonetheless, it's a man on an animal. So their, their fear of the horse was a little bit lessened, first of all. Okay. And this is where the gift kind of comes in that I'll mention. Initially, the both and the differences in the responses. Montezuma, and I'm sorry to jump back, had sent gifts to Cortes. Okay, nice gifts, and Cortes would respond, "Oh, thank you for this. We like this. We like this, and we really like the gold. We want more of this." Okay, and we're gonna. So, on the other hand, um, Pizarro was presented with gifts, and some of it were nice gifts. Here's some gold, you know what I mean, some silver. And then there were some kind of roasted ducks, okay, and a statue of a castle, which I'd take as a little bit more of a warning. I can't communicate with you, but understand, here's some, I think you want some of this, now go home, okay. I absolutely believe in my reading and research, and it's been stated, Atahualpa actually thought he would just kill them, get rid of them all. And when they actually meet, that was his plan, which is the great irony. So, at any rate, they plan Pizarro just keeps marching on, okay? And eventually they come to a smaller town or village where they're going to meet, okay? Now, exactly how they work that out, I don't know, okay? But what took place there was um, the Spaniards all came inside the village, okay, and uh, they positioned themselves all around the outside perimeter of that. Not necessarily to face and defend the village, but they were focusing on what was inside the village. Again, Pizarro had a plan, okay, so to speak, uh, but his was just different. Now, Atahualpa arrived and he had thousands with him. Okay.
Now, who is this, Rich?
Atahualpa, excuse me, is the Inca emperor.
Okay,
Okay, so now we're back in Peru with Pizarro. I'm sorry.
got it.
He arrives with the, with in quote, and he is carried on a giant litter. We don't know exactly how many, but lots of guys are carrying him on poles. I mean, it's got width and it's got length, and you're you're talking to somebody. It was like taking a room in the palace and
Right.
transporting it on these guys' shoulders. So they come and they are basically induced, and Atahualpa then kind of, for whatever reason, doesn't take his biggest, toughest army guys. It isn't like the personal Praetorian Guard, okay? But he goes in on this great litter, and they've got a few armed men, but largely not armed. They're sitting there holding this thing. And the Spaniards are all around the outside. So, in essence, they've got the Inca king, emperor, and the Incas encircled, militarily speaking, and all the other combatants that he could call are on the outside. That still may not look like much until um, a Catholic priest comes out with the Bible. Okay, now here is where you say, when these people can't translate, what does it mean? And he's, of course, speaking in Spanish, that here's the truth, and Jesus, and this is, in quote, our message that we're bringing to you. And so the Bible gets passed up to Atahualpa, and he thumbs, well, it means nothing to him, right? So he throws it aside, okay? At which point the priest kind of turns and runs, and starts screaming to the soldiers, and that's the signal for the attack, okay? So all of a sudden, from all sides come what are, I mean, Viking berserkers. They're not Viking berserkers, but I mean, the Spanish were tough. Yeah, I mean, I clearly have a picture in my mind what these guys would have been like in battle, and they start hacking away with these heavy duty metal weapons. And what do you do against that? Especially if you're like these guys, I got to hold up the emperor. But wait a minute, I can't. They were just bodies to literally hack through. So in essence, the Spanish did that and captured Atahualpa. So this is the age-old story that captured the king. Didn't matter how many he had out there. And so he's, of course, trying to preserve his life. So now they go to the capital city. They imprison him, keep him under their control, and then they have him issuing the orders to get what they want. Okay, and again they start with the silver and gold. They keep, if you do this, well, you'll be okay. If you do this, you'll be okay. And it's one of those things. And then finally they say, okay, if you become Catholic, you know what I mean, and convert to Christianity, you'll be okay, and we'll let you go. And he did that, but even then they said, "Oh no, I think we'll kill you instead." But by that time they had real control over it, and now you again are going to get the gold and the silver from the Inca Empire, headed back to Spain. Okay, so Spain, by the time you're done with Pizarro, which is 1532. So between 1519-21 and 1532, they've conquered, in essence, the two civilizations that would have stood in the way, you know what I mean, indigenous wise, to their further influence. And of course, now with more money, you can equip and send bigger army, more ships. I mean, it only makes sense. And you're still coming in with all this gold. And it was interesting up to this point. Spain just becomes the most powerful country on the continent of Europe, but possibly in the world. And when you look at square miles, literally unbelievable. So they're now in charge, so to speak.
And then how ironic that they're pushing the Bible onto these civilizations when they're kind of doing the opposite of what the Bible teaches you.
Yes, that's always the problem, isn't it? I mean, it's when you read all these wars we fought in God's name and over God. I don't think that's what God had in mind. You
Yeah, I
know,
don't think so either.
it's a so yeah. I think we've got to do some soul searching on that type of stuff. Um, On the other hand, when you take that factor out, which I don't necessarily like to take out, but you take that factor out, this is really just part of human history. It seems like a clash of civilizations, and one wants to conquer another and enrich themselves, you know what I mean, and move on. And so you're looking at that kind of clash, and the Spanish went out. Now the Spanish begin to lose their grip a little bit. Okay, there are two battles that take place that it doesn't change their position. They're still the richest and most powerful. But it's one thing to say we're undefeated, okay, and it's another to say, okay, somebody beat them. You know, it can be done. So the first big one was in 1588, the Spanish Armada. So there's two influences going the defeat of the Spanish Armada. Back in Europe, things are happening because also around the year 1500, 1519, begin to set. You have Luther with his 95 Theses and the beginning of the Protestant church. Okay. And the thing there was he got backed politically, particularly by German princes who were tired of their money going off to the Pope. Okay. So the Lutheran church, the Protestant church gets going. So how does England fit into this? Well, England had a king named Henry VIII. Originally, he was married to Catherine of Spain. Okay. He had a Spanish princess as his bride. And they uh, had one child who became Mary, who comes down in English history as Bloody Mary, and her mother raised her. But it's kind of a sad tale. Catherine really wants to become, have a male heir and son. Okay. Well, that doesn't happen. Henry VIII is kind of a lusty guy. Okay. And he originally writes a book, and he is defending the Roman Catholic Church, and in fact receives the title from the Pope of Defender of the Faith. Okay, so England, in quote, is remaining Catholic. Okay, and then you have a marriage between the English king and the Spanish princess. You're uniting these two countries under the Catholic banner. Well,
Now,
what happened?
during this time, and when we talk about the Pope, we're talking about like the Vatican.
Yes, and the Catholic Pope in Vatican. Yes,
That's what we're talking about, right?
yes.
Okay.
Okay. And again, there's all your history that goes back to that. At any rate, it's looking good from a Catholic perspective at this point, and you've got to deal with maybe these rebellious German princes and a few others. And the church had had previous, in quote, reformers, or, that they were. But the long and short, this one is sticking, okay? And I won't go into all of the reasons. Well, then, lo and behold, Henry, in one of his many dalliances with people out of wedlock, okay, he's he hooked up with this court cutie by the name of Anne Boleyn, all right, and she's pregnant. Well, now Henry has a problem because she's pregnant, and that could be a male heir to the throne. Now he's motivated because England had just fought a long civil war over who was going to be the dynasty that ruled. Okay. And Henry VIII's family had won. And so he was king, but without another heir, are we now going to fight over who the heir is going to be? Okay. So, okay, he wants to divorce Catherine. He appeals to the Pope. Will you grant this divorce? Now, normally the Pope, a king, and we understand, yeah, these marriages were for political reasons, everything else would probably say yes. But in this case, no, the King of Spain is going, wait a minute. No way that we're going to allow Henry to dump a Spanish princess by the wayside and take up with some, little tart from the court. Okay. And so basically the Pope says, no, Henry, I can't do that. Okay. And Henry goes, oh, okay. Well, I know. So his plan is, I will make myself head of the church and government in England. Okay. So he wasn't just the political head, he's going to be the religious head. Thus, you have the establishment of the Church of England. Okay. Known over there as the Anglican Church and known here as the Episcopalian in America.
I
But they,
I think Arcade, this is a good stopping point for us.
okay, sure.
Um, it's interesting what's going on. I've probably learned this at some point in my lifetime, but it's really just brand new to me, and it's interesting
Yeah,
what's going
yeah.
on. We got Spain, who has conquered two civilizations now, uh, and now we're getting the religious thing involved, and it's interesting what's happening. I had no idea that all these countries were talking to each other back then. I thought it was like, this is our country and leave us alone kind of a deal.
Oh no, there was lots of interaction. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So
Well, we'll get together again and pick up the story.
pick it up on
Okay.
our next episode.
Okay.
Uh, talk to you soon, sir, and we'll speak
Okay.
shortly.
All right. See ya.